I'm going to talk about three different contexts in this presentation. Artistic projects. Really, artistic projects are projects where the art itself or the music itself is the central aim of the project. I am going to create new artworks, new music, and it's going to reach an audience. And that is the point of the project. I'm also going to talk about business and commercial projects. Now, commercial projects can also be artistic projects. An artistic project might be a project that has a commercial imperative. It might be working with a record company as a funding partner in order to release some music. It might be working with a live organisation, so you put things online. It might be working with the Arts Council, but it also might be ticketed so that you put on a performance and an audience buys something and there's some sort of financial transaction. It's rare now for projects to be just artistic only. There's almost always a commercial interest or an opportunity for commercial interest. And I'm going to talk about research. So research really is anything that's an investigation. And I think it's often overlooked that most artistic projects are also research projects. It's very unusual to develop new artworks, new music, new sound installations that aren't asking research questions. So one can easily, well not easily, but one can always, I think, turn an artistic investigation into a research project and find another context for potential funding for that project. And I'm going to talk about some personal examples of those that link research, business, and artistic projects, okay? And the thing I think that determines which one you're at, or which one of those you're doing, and it could be one project that has three different arms, or even more different arms, is who is the audience? Who am I aiming at? If it's a research audience, the audience might be people who are going to research conferences. You might want to go to a research context and present some ideas. In that sense, it might be an academic audience, okay? It might be research journals. You might want to develop that conference paper into a journal paper, okay? You might, and therefore it's kind of an academic context. It might be that the context is an audience that you might play at a gig, or it might be an audience that might listen to your music on a streaming platform, okay? In which case that might be a more commercial context. It might be that you're working with a gallery partner, like the Arnolfini, or a gallery or a museum, or a pop-up gallery somewhere, so that there's more of a kind of like a gallery art context that changes the context. So the context massively changes what the emphasis of your project is, but it could easily be the same project, but it just might have a different emphasis in different occasions and different places. What is the context of your project? Is it a music project? Is it just about music? And is it just about you making music? Okay. Is it about something to do with innovation? Are you making something that's innovative? Are you doing something that has a commercial context, for example? Or does it have a research context? Are you investigating? So research is basically any investigation that creates new knowledge, okay? That makes it research. So if you are creating new knowledge, as an MA student, for example, well, big tick, because you don't have to, because the main learning outcome of a master's project is that you're aware of how to create new knowledge, but you don't have to create new knowledge. If you're creating new knowledge, then that's the main learning outcome for a PhD, for example. So you might think, oh, I need to do a PhD. Or become a researcher to create new knowledge. So the second question I put here is, who are you, right? And I don't mean, are you Steve who lives at 42 Balmoral Crescent? I mean, who are you in this project? You know, you might be Harry Thomas who's making a new drill record, for example, right? That's probably him, but he'll have partners as well. He'll be working with all sorts of people in order to make that happen. So who are you and who are your partners, okay? So when I say who are you, I also mean, are you part of an organisation? And when you approach funding or think about a project, you might think about, okay, is this project a project that could involve DBS? Could I work with DBS to approach another organisation for money or for a venue or for whatever, okay? If you're Steve from 42 Balmoral Crescent, are you working with other people? So have you got a business with Polly, who lives in Bath, and have you got an organisation, okay? So you might be Steve and Polly and you might be making music, but you might be making music for something else. You might be making music with somebody else. So that's the really important question. What is your context? So when you say, who are you and who are your partners, it's really, and then you're looking to fund a project, one of the first questions a funding organisation will ask is, okay, so what is your context? What is your organisation? So if you're an and that is important in terms of aligning to eligibility, right? So one of the first things you can do before you look at what even a funding body does is ask the question, am I eligible to apply for funding for this project? Some funding bodies only fund charities, for example. So you have to be a charity or find a charity in order to make that project funded. Some projects will only fund charities and non-profit organisations. You might need to form a non-profit organisation or a CIC, community interest company, in order to be eligible for funding. Some funding organisations only fund people that work in universities that have a research remit. So you need to get a job in a university or find somebody that works in a university to partner with in order to get that funding. Some funders do fund individuals, like the Arts Council, they do fund individuals. But it's rare for an individual to be able to apply for funding. And it's rare for a funder to look at an individual and go, yeah, you're a safe bet, Steve from 42 Balmoral Crescent, I'll give you £500,000 to do your thing, right? So think about when you're Steve or Polly from Bath or whatever, think about what does the funding organisation think of me? So it's about you to interface with the world and go, okay, well, do you know what? Our project's amazing because of this, 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 and this. This is what we're going to give the world. This is our plan. This is my track record, and this is who I am. So for younger people, which is everybody in this room except me, okay, you might not think that you have a track record. You might not have awards, prizes. You might not have hit records. You might not have other things, but everybody does have a track record. And you can point to anything that you've done, for example, as an undergraduate student, your honours projects, your dissertations, anything that you've done outside of university, any projects that you have, they're all track records. And publications don't necessarily need to be academic publications that are in the world and are kind of ratified in terms of academic publications. A publication is a gig. If you've done a gig, okay, somewhere, that's a live performance. You call it live performances. You can list the gigs that you've done. That's a publication in the eyes of what I would call practice-based research. Okay, so list your public performances. That's part of your track record. If you've released any music, that's a project. If you've written something as part of your master's project or your undergraduate project, your honours dissertation is a publication. Anything that you've done with anybody else, if you've done any soundtrack for film, for television, for anything, they're all, you can point to that as your track record. And there's always something that you can point to that is something in the world, okay? Because that's what you're doing. You're interfacing with the world when you're developing a project. What do your potential funders need to prove to themselves or their own funders? Okay. All funding agencies and funding bodies have to have their own kind of sense of guidelines about who they are and what they give money to and why. And it's an essential thing for you to do if you're thinking of applying to money for someone to develop a project. So, for example, all of the research councils that are government-led and have to sort of a question to the government, like the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, the EPSRC. Okay, there's a whole lot, the ESRC, the Environment Social Sciences Research Council. They all have to account to the government and say, we gave this money to these people, and this is why we gave money to them, okay? So they have to explain to the government why they gave money to these projects and how successful they were. Everybody that gives you money has to tell somebody else, even if it's themselves or their own board, why they gave you money and what happened to that project. All the charitable funding organisations do the same. The Elm Grant Trust, for example, that I'll talk about, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, the Paul Hamlin Foundation, they all have to answer to themselves and explain why they do this. So it's useful to have that mindset when you're applying for funding, because that will help you choose the right place to apply your funding, to apply to for your funding, okay? The way that most organisations think about funding is as a partnership, right? So it's not just somewhere where you go to and say, give us £500,000 and then in 2 years I'll make you an amazing thing. What they want to do, in the main, is work with you as a partner and help you develop the project, and they want to be involved. Yeah? The Arts Council want you to invite them to the opening. They want you to talk about them even before you've made the application. The Paul Hamlyn Foundation, they want to talk to you about developing your project. Use that. Work with them even before you've put in the application. Contact them and say, I'm Polly who lives in Bath. I've got this really great idea. Are you the right organisation for me? It would be very rare for them not to reply and not to have a 20-minute meeting with you, because it's their job. Their job is to make sure that anybody that contacts them is the right person to perhaps form a partnership with. If they're good, the person talking to you will say, do you know what, Polly, we're not the right place, but do you know what, these people are great, and I'll give you their contact. They might say, we do think your project's right, and we like this bit of it, but we're not so keen on this bit. Maybe if you want to work with us, maybe just develop that bit. That's the sort of conversation that you might start with. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later in the talk about some good developments and conversations that I've had with funders, and ones that were good and then didn't work out so well, and why they didn't work out so well, and what I've learned from that. But what in that example that I'm going to give, I'll explain how the culture in the world changed radically, and we didn't really spot it, and therefore didn't get this grant because of a big cultural change that then changed the funding organisation. So that's an important thing to think about when applying for money. Is the world changing since you started thinking about the project 3 years ago? All funders and all projects need an evaluation strategy. So you need to think about how you would evaluate your project. And it's important to think not, oh God, I've got to write an evaluation, which most of us do think, but to think really, okay, how do I evaluate the success of my project? What is a successful project that I'm going to do? Is it that the project is amazing and makes loads of money? Is it that I develop an audience for my new drill album? Is it that I just have a prototype and the prototype works and doesn't work and I've tested it? What does the success look like? And be honest about it. You know, if I'm getting, I'm going to talk about several projects that have got lots of different budgets, from £400 to £2 million. Okay, that £400, what does the successful project look like in terms of that funding organisation giving me £400 to then develop? And how would I evaluate that strategy? Evaluation is really, really difficult. You will have all had to evaluate projects that you've done in your lives, in your student lives and your working lives. The most important thing about evaluation is that you need to triangulate it. You need to point to other projects to say, okay, here's my project. This happened, this happened, this happened, and then triangulate it with other projects in the world. Could be other music, it could be other innovation projects, but how does your project or your development of your project compare to what happened in those projects?